So today we are joined by David Garcia Pawley, Head of Consumer and Market Insights for Europe at Samsung. David is a true consumer champion. With 25 years experience, he's a master at listening to the voices that really matter. David's work shapes how one of the biggest tech brands in the world listens, acts and evolves. Thoughtful, sharp, and deeply passionate about bridging the empathy gap, he spent his career proving that decisions don't come from assumptions, but from understanding. David, welcome to William Minds.
Morning. Thank you, Laura.
It's so brilliant to have you, David, because you speak so passionately about curiosity and about people. And so I know people are going to love listening to this, but also 25 years of championing real people in businesses. That is incredible.
Well, thank you. Yes. Well, I think it's you're very fortunate to have been exposed to some. Had the opportunity to work in some in great places. I started working at Procter and Gamble, which I think has shaped a lot of my my career moving forward. I mean, it's one of the best companies one can work with if you're interested in marketing in the consumer. It's a company that really values it, and I had the great the possibility of working with them in Spain and working in European projects from a very early stage. And I think that's, wherever you start has a big impact later on in throughout your career. So I think it will be the starting point. And since then, yes, a number of companies, agencies, different countries, local responsibilities, mainly in Spain, but also European, as I'm working now, and working very closely in a country in a company like Samsung. It's a global company, and it's inevitable that you're working with other regions, and of course with our headquarters in Korea. So it's I think it helps to shape all these different experiences, help to shape the overall my situation currently. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me today. I've got kind of five big questions for you, which I'm hoping is going to take us on some interesting turns, kind of hearing about your experiences and perspective as well. My first question is kind of deliberately a little bit kind of cheeky. I've been talking to a lot of people about joining this podcast. I've been agency side my whole life, but I've seen into kind of clients' worlds, and I think to me it looks a really, really, really tough job. You are holding a mirror up to businesses. People talk about consumer being the center of everything and the driving force, the kind of oxygen, but naturally in the kind of day-to-day of things, it's passion projects and the bottom line and our sector that kind of moves to the forefront of people's minds. And you can sometimes be challenged, I think, in talking consumer to people. So my first question to you is, it's a really, really, really tough job. Why do you bother?
Yeah, I sometimes you sometimes wonder. Yes, it's I think it has. In my case, I think it has to do with a curiosity. I think being intellectually stimulated. I think it's I find it's a particular role in insights where you're constantly listening and learning from others. So I think it does motivate me to learn new things every day. So this continuous learning, I think it's important. Is one of the things that that motivates me. A big thing that motivates me is it's all the things to do with the variety. So whether you having worked as many years as a client, but working with companies that have different products. So I mentioned Procter and Gamble earlier on. The idea of one year you're working for a brand like Hugo Boss or things like that, it's all very very fashionable, and then next year you're just disinfecting toilets around Europe. We're working for Viacal or other very relevant brands in the categories, but obviously you're talking with different consumers, different needs, different emotions. So it's interesting how insights can be applied in different categories and of course different industries. As I am now very happy to be working at Samsung, front leading. There's a lot of innovation that goes on at Samsung. So I think that's a big motivator, and the fact that I'm working with an excellent team. I'm very fortunate with the team I'm leading now. They're all very experienced insight professionals, also from different backgrounds, different nationalities, and I think that's what motivates me every day. Is pretty different and positive in that way. Yeah.
And presumably over your career, there's been these kind of amazing moments whereby actually that real deep customer understanding absolutely kind of cuts through and does kind of change the game for a business.
More recently, over the last few months, we've got in Sweden a smart home. We've got a home outside Stockholm where we've kitted it up with all these Samsung products. They're all interconnected, and we've invited families to live there. Different families where they would live in this smart home to to understand all the connectivity. So all this ethnographic research, I think it's something that has particularly motivated me. I think we do not place sufficient relevance and importance to it, and that is, I think, where a lot of the whys are answered, or you get a good idea on the why things happen or work, because we tend to be very numbers focused, more so in the business. And company like Samsung, Korean companies, Asian companies, but most companies are down to the numbers, and I don't mean just financially, which of course they must do, because there is an element of survival there. But in terms of consumer understanding, it's a bit challenging on occasions to justify to the business, look, I'm going to speak with 6 individuals to understand this, and to shape our strategic decisions. And you may find that someone in management said, well, I think I know more than those 6 people. So you have to justify and convince them of how relevant that is. And in this occasion in Sweden, we've got this house with, again, all the different televisions, the washing machine, how they talk to each other, and you can control everything through your app. And actually having a family, so you can have a married couple with 2 young children living there for 6 weeks, and listening, observing, getting their feedback. I think that's the best way to really understand the benefits and areas of opportunity of improvement for a product. So I think those are the kind of projects which are interesting, they're motivating, and they really help the business.
I love that. I think that, there's something amazing, isn't there, at looking at the whole? And I can totally imagine that there are stakeholders that think, really, can't we kind of ask them, is there any way you can sort of shortcut that? Can we do this in a couple of hours, not kind of 6 weeks? But I think that bravery to sort of take in the whole, not just looking at your product or your sector, but starting with their life and then understanding where that fits in is an incredible perspective. My next question, David, is I think my favorite question on the list, because I'm very interested in people's careers, and I'm also really interested in kind of relationships and mindsets and inspiration and all of those sorts of things. And my next question is, who do you owe? I guess with the kind of acknowledgement that we're all standing on a lot of other people's shoulders, aren't we? There are a lot of people who kind of shape us over all sorts of points in our life and learning and career. And you can kind of take this any way you want. You might know this person very well, and they might be someone you've worked with a lot. They might be sort of a more distant figure, I don't know, an author or just a sort of source of inspiration. But if I was asked you to boil it down to kind of one person, one influence, who do you really owe something to at this point in your career?
Rafa Urban is the name of, he's the CEO of Havas, one of the media agencies now in Spain at present. And, I've stayed in contact with him. I think I'm part of an ex-Procter community in Spain, and we're still, 25 years later, we're still in touch. We meet every year, twice a year. We do social work together. So I think we've created that group. The fact you can keep that relationship with your old managers shows that there's that personal involvement. And so I think he had a lot of impact in my initial stage of my career, and then moving forward, the fact that I'm still in touch with him. And then Victoria Hardy, who's at Primark right now. I think she's been excellent. She's been my manager until very recently here at Samsung. She's now at Primark. And again, it's, I'm talking of early in my career, but later in my career, you keep meeting amazing people, and they do have similar traits. I think they keep you motivated. They're intelligent people, but keeps you intellectually motivated, which I say is one of my main drivers in this position, in this role. So similar people, or people who may be different to you in certain areas, but whom you can learn from. So I think that she's been these two people have in particular. So it's not choosing one, but just a couple.
I love that, and I love the sound of your ex proctors meeting up twice a year. What a sort of happy story. So we're going to sort of take a turn back into kind of focusing on you know, what you're kind of doing, and what you're kind of really looking to influence, I guess, in your role. And I am really kind of keen to understand, you know, a major part of your role is winning consumers' kind of hearts and minds. Like, what are some of your secrets? What are some of the sort of smartest moves to make in that area at the moment?
Well, when you work for a company, there's obviously this, irrespective of the size, there's all the politics involved in any company. So there's is how do you land consumer insights in this case? There's a lot of listening going on. So, you know, part of the work is listen to consumers, but I also need to listen to what the business needs. And I think, mustn't forget, I mean, I am working for a company. We need to sell our products, and that's what I'm getting paid for, and that is my role and my responsibility. How I do it is influencing in as much as possible and bringing the consumer into the you know, to the table, to making sure that they're part of the discussion and the conversation. So I think there's an element of listening, and then also being very humble. I think there's you know, we have 1 mouth and 2 ears for a reason, and I think that is important in consumer insights, but also in the business, in the boardroom, and trying to pick the most relevant moments where to share the consumer point of view. I think it, again, that depends in companies. I think in Samsung we're a product-led company, engineering company, technological company, where the product is excellent, and it's more challenging to, you know, to bring the consumer, and at what stage of the conversation is the consumer brought in. How much does it affect the development of the products? And we tend to, being so engineering driven, we create great products, and then we try and see the best way of selling it. You know, so, you know, what is the best target consumer for these products? So I think that is a big challenge. And I guess the secret is finding the right people to influence as early on as possible in the process. So a lot of the insights we develop here in Europe, I will always make sure that the product planning team in Korea are aware of that. So we can influence earlier on in that stage, in that part of the process. So I think that's one of the relevant parts. And a second one I would say is the importance of effective insight communication. So within the team, I have a person who's championing that whole area. I think we have it as an ongoing work stream, because it's not only the insight, is how it lands within the business. We need to communicate to different audiences, top management, people within our team. You know, this, when I started research, it was, you know, 100 slides, and, you know, no one reads 100 slides these days. You need to be able to do the 10-minute, the elevator pitch, the 3-slide, the 5 slides. So you need to make sure that storytelling skill is present throughout all the insights. So it's not really about the insight, it's how you deliver it, and that's how you may have more or less impact. So that's an area in which we put a lot of emphasis in at Samsung and with my team. Mm-hmm.
Can you let me or anyone listening into a little secret around some of that effective communication? Are there any sort of particular strategies or techniques that you have found that have really sort of propelled you forwards?
Well, I think that there's a lot of models out there. I mean, we put a lot of focus on SCQA, so the situation, complication, question and answer approach to how we tell our stories. There's also the pyramid model, which we try to incorporate. But I think it's very simple, very basic on who are we talking to, what do they want to hear, basically. Making sure that it's very succinct, and then a lot of visuals. I mean, I think especially in marketing, we do use a lot of visual material. But again, we do separate versions depending on the audience. And an important thing for our storytelling is trying to incorporate as many sources as possible and integrating them, so that you just do a study. I use an attitude or this study. You try and bring things from market intelligence, social listening this day. So you complement and you bring it to life. So the consumer is just numbers. So even if you have a quantitative study, what is being said in YouTube, Reddit, Facebook, how do you bring that into that story when you're describing some numbers? So I think the integration of other sources just enriches the story, makes it a lot more interesting and relevant.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Again, coming back to that bigger picture that you seem to kind of love so much and see the benefit of. What do you think people are really missing then when it comes to customer obsession?
I think that I find a lot of assumptions, or we tend to. I get a feeling that in business we tend to do analysis on base size one. So like we know because of well my wife didn't like this, my husband didn't like this, my children didn't like this product. So obviously that must be the truth. So I think some of the challenges and I find is around having these assumptions which you take as the truth and assuming that consumers are like us. I mean, many of us working in a business, something like Samsung, we forget that we're a privileged minority in many areas. And, when we're talking about some of our products and the cost of some of the products, it's very different in other parts of the UK. It's different when you're, in my case, having European responsibility. There's no such thing as a European consumer. There's not a global consumer. There's not a European consumer. I'm originally from Spain, and some things that may be similar to the UK, many are not. Here we're, in the UK, as I say, probably different living here in the south as, further up north. So I think acknowledging that and that absolute truth, and it's difficult making sure that different voices are heard, and there's a lot of us, and it's just not just a minority.
I love that, acknowledging that it's not that simple. There isn't one consumer. This isn't about what your kids say about something. I think that's such part of the kind of the challenge and the mission of people in kind of roles like ours. So my sort of final area that I wanted to talk to you about, David, is a little bit more. I guess it's focused on now, but it's also focused kind of a little bit more kind of further into the future. And I'm keen to understand like how you people in your team, people in roles like yours, will keep winning. What is the almost maybe personal quality or kind of mindset or something that sort of sets them apart, enables them to get businesses to understand consumers, really sort of influence the things that happen?
Well, obviously the bring the consumer into the discussion is key. I think it always has been and always will be. At the end of the day, the consumer who buys our products, and if they don't buy the products, you don't have a business. So it's a very basic thing. So we need to continue being mindful of consumers. There's also that adaptation. There's a parallel. Our environment is changing. Consumers' needs are changing. We need to adapt to that. So that goes in parallel. We need to be in tune with the changes that are going outside the offices. I think one of the big recommendations is get out there. Get out of the office and in store. It's free. Go and see where your products are being shown. Go and listen to consumers standing, whether you're an FMCG brand, whether you're in technology. Go and stand John Lewis in MediaMarkt, wherever you are, and just stand by the shelf and listen to what people are doing, the conversation they're having. So I think that continues listening and learning on what the consumers want, the desires. That's an important aspect, and adapting our strategies, adapting our consumer insights methodologies, and keep pushing forward. And on a personal basis, I've always believed in the 80-20. So as long as there's no such thing as an ideal job. Even if you're a professional football player, you still have to put up with with the swearing when you're playing on a Sunday and of the other team. Well, it goes with the job. As long as 80% of what you're doing is interesting, motivates you, you're happy with, then that's fine. You know, there's always going to be that 20% of each of all our jobs where we'd rather not do, or which are not as stimulating, motivating. But hey, as long as the other 80% is good, you can put up with that 20 and keep going. It's when you start getting down to 60-40 or something like that, that's when you've got that's when you probably need to look for something else, probably.
I think that's such a refreshing perspective, David, because I think so much of what you see on social media, even on places like LinkedIn, I think, is so about sort of constantly optimizing, almost like don't put up with 20% that you don't like. Don't put up with the swearing on Sundays. I think that's such a kind of great perspective, that there's always that look at the other side. Thank you so much for talking to me today, David. I found it really inspiring. There's definitely some things that I'm going to take away. I love the idea of a trip on your own and just kind of properly opening your eyes. And I do think that you see way more when you are sort of solo out in the world, like when you're traveling in the world. So I think that's a really lovely take, and definitely that 80-20 rule. I think that will land with so many people. But I think your big picture view of everything, of the consumer's life, of the consumer's world, is really inspiring. At a time whereby people want sort of answers, and to boil it down, to sort of take a step back, I think is a great perspective. So thank you so much for chatting to me today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.